grandpa used to live down James Street, which is just down the street here. And being little, you know, you hear the sirens going, run up the street every time. So it started out young. I wanted to do it, you know. And then, of course, 9/11 happened. That helped out a little more, so I think it was April the next year, I think, is when I asked to be on the department. And they pretty much had to take the test and pass the test, and here I am, 15 years later.
Oh, I had some buddies that were on the department back when I was 30 plus, and they'd kind of ask for a while, you know, maybe a year or 2 years, and so one day I just said, you know what, I'll give her a try. We'll see where it goes, and here I am 30 years later. So
I grew up in a small town just west of here, Baldwin, Iowa, and back in the heyday, I guess there was about 125 people in town, and you know, we had a volunteer fire department. My dad was on the fire department, so once I come back from college and was living in Baldwin, I joined the department there, and once I moved to Maquoketa and stuff, I just joined here.
I guess what made me want to become one is my dad's been a firefighter for many years, so I grew up around here, and I just wanted to give back to the community, so I thought this would be a good way.
The fire department was actually founded here in 1883, and so hard to believe in a town this size, but there's actually 2 fire companies at one time, and then it kind of came together to form what you see here today. So we have some documented history, you know, some of the guys have spent time in looking at that, and so like I said, I find it very interesting that even on a local level we have a pretty steep history.
Times have changed, the firefight has changed, but the education that I gained from this department was really valuable. It led me to where I am today as a career firefighter with the Rock Island Arsenal Fire Department, Department of Defense.
Basically, the fire department is comprised of the fire department proper, who responds, the members respond to all fire calls, and then the rescue squad is made up of 15 individuals within the fire department that trains an extra night of the month, and they go out to any of the accidents that happen, the heart attacks, any type of rescue imaginable, industrial, farm, car accidents, obviously. I was a part of that team for many, many years, and I resigned from that probably 3 or 4 years ago now to give a younger person the opportunity to get on, because well, the fire service in general is a young person's job. And as I've gotten older, I realize my limitations. So that's one reason why I'm in my final year as chief. But no, they are a great group of guys, and if I'm ever in an accident, I want them by my side and helping out, that's for sure.
Just that, you know, superhero type thing that, you know, you look up to them so much. And went to college, came back to town, then we moved away from town for just a little bit, my wife and I. And then when we came back to town, you know, it just seemed fitting. My brother was on, you know, and it was just something I'd always had in the back of my mind. And boys were at that age, I had 2 sons, and, you know, you kind of want something for them to look up to.
Every Saturday
Probably.
growing up?
Every Saturday, yeah.
Because, like Mom said earlier, when we were little, she worked weekends, and Dad had stuff to do down here. Trucks need maintained, so the trucks get maintained, and we ran around.
The radio desk was lots of buttons.
It was all fun and games. So the first time you keyed the mic, and Dad's like, excuse me.
We had the old ladder truck, and they used to use, I shouldn't even probably say this, but they used to use it as a jungle gym, and they just loved it. They run everywhere, but they were all babies, obviously, at one time or another, but
like they told you earlier, that I brought playpen in and they would sleep in the meetings room, and I'd turn lights out and they'd have to go take their naps just like they would if they were home. But I'd feed them and they'd hang out, and a lot of fun.
One day we had a truck out and he come running out in his little Superman cape and jumped on the truck with us and stuff. So
my oldest sister said she never saw Dad run unless there was a fire. Over there was a siren that blew and everybody ran through town. And Joan says she doesn't remember ever seeing Dad run except when he went to a fire. And I thought, well, she wasn't obviously when the hay baler fell over or the other things going on that I knew about. But that was, I don't want to say that was his excitement. That was a good way. That's what I remember.
We all have full-time jobs.
Yeah.
This is a 100% volunteer fire department, so everybody has another job that they have to leave and come and respond to.
I work right across the street at the courthouse, so thankfully my boss allows it if there's a call during the day, during business hours, as long as I'm not tied up with something, he'll let me go and do the duties, and when I'm done, come back to my regular job. But it's kind of, it's real nice because daytime calls we're low manpower here, so a lot of guys have outside jobs or jobs that won't allow them to leave, so it's real nice that I'm able to do that. So
We get called for just about anything. It can be, a smoke alarm. We've done search and rescue for lost victims. Worked on the Maquoketa River several times doing that. I mentioned we had a feller fall down an elevator shaft in a place that I never knew had an elevator at all. It looks like a machine shed, you would have never known. Get the call and hear the address and know the business and think in the back of your head, there's an elevator there? Obviously you should know everything, but you can't. But sometimes, it makes you twerk your head a little bit and think about it, but it doesn't overly surprise you.
First thing, it's an adrenaline rush. You kind of listen to the call and, get down here, get suited up, get on a truck, and, you're trying to think of what you got to do, and
Plan of action.
yeah, your plan of action to what's going to go on.
And a lot of your training goes into that, because if it's a rural call, you know what trucks you're going to take. You're only going to take certain trucks, so you got to get on those. And if it's a city call, you know what trucks are going to go. Grass fire, the different type of call determines which trucks are going to roll on that call.
It's a pure shot of adrenaline is probably the easiest way to describe it at first. But your mind is kind of racing right away because, like you said, I can be sitting at my desk and deep into something else that I'm working on, and then all of a sudden it's boom, you got to go and drop everything and leave. And so it's a lot of adrenaline at first, and then it's just collecting your thoughts, and because you're totally switching gears to what you're gonna do. So
really the training kind of helps you prepare on what you're going to do. I also instruct for the state of Iowa, so I train other firefighters, which is kind of quite an honor to do too. But going through that training and seeing the different things, the basics that you have to do, the basics of firefighting that you have to do, all of that really applies when you get to the scene. So just doing that over and over and over again, things become second nature.
I always hung my coat on the doorknob of the door, going out the door. At night, there's a chair next to my bed that had my pants and my shirt and my socks right there. And so went off, I could get dressed and be on the run real quick.
Well, it's gotten different for me over the years. I started out as a firefighter. I mean, doing grunt work and everything like that. And I've been an officer for so long now, but even my roles have changed. And emotionally, like she said earlier, some calls you don't get amped up for. Other ones you definitely do. There's no doubt about it. I've been doing it a long time, but still, there's certain calls that they just give you shudders, and you're thinking, oh wow, what's going to happen? What's going on? What caused this? And it's been tough. I mean, it's been fun. Oh, it's been a lot of fun. Met a lot of great people across the state. Definitely. Several states. Wisconsin, Illinois, all across Iowa. Made some very good friends. Emotionally, it definitely puts an impact on you.
and physically also, you know, you're up all night for a call or whatever, and you still got to go to work. You still have to put in a shift at work, you know, or whatever is going on. So, and without these three, I wouldn't have been able to do it.
So on January 19th, 2008, we had a commercial structure fire downtown Maquoketa, and it was, you know, it was the real deal. It was the big one, as they say. So it was a life-changing experience for a lot of us.
My memory is waking up on my parents' couch from being out celebrating the night before, and one of my friends called me and told me downtown was on fire, and I didn't believe him, obviously, because that's a pretty far-fetched thing to hear. And then he said, no, really, and go outside and look. And my parents live across town from downtown, and I went out to the end of the driveway and I could see the smoke. So that was kind of my first impression, and then I came down there and watched and went home when I got cold, unlike the guys here that were on at the time. So
it came about 1:30 in the morning, I think it was, give or take a little bit. For some reason, I just happened to be up and I heard the scanner traffic, and I heard him say, you know, call the fire department out. So I knew it was coming. I got dressed and I headed down here, and I crawled up in the truck, and the first thing I remember seeing as I looked out the bay door was I could see the building, and I could see it coming through the windows over on the buildings. And I thought, we are going to be here a long time.
I was in bed, and the alarm sounded, and lo and behold, it came in the 100 block of Main Street, and you just know right away that that's a downtown fire. We had no idea really the magnitude of that call or what that was going to be, except we knew it was very cold out. And I think most of us that's been around a while, we try and prepare for that a little bit, maybe put on an extra sweatshirt before we leave the house, or an extra pair of socks or something like that. But I remember the radio traffic, and it was pretty excited, so you think, okay, this is going to be something more than just your average structure fire. And I was in the rescue truck, as we call it, and went around the corner and headed south on Main Street, and as we turned off a Platte onto Main Street, I could see the flames rolling almost halfway across Main Street, and I'm thinking, oh my, this is going to be a long, cold night. And it was. So I immediately called the dispatch center for mutual aid, because I knew this was bigger than Maquoketa Fire Department could handle on their own. And we had departments from over 20 towns come and help us eventually. And it took each and every one of them too, because we certainly couldn't have done it alone. And the community support was unbelievable. The devastation that fire left was just unimaginable at the time. I felt so bad for the business owners. That was not one of our proudest moments.
I do remember driving to the call. It was probably 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. Windows iced up, wipers on, washer fluid going, trying to look through all the ice, and I ended up driving to the department with my head stuck out the window just so I could see. Yeah, it was cold. I get to the station, and we're all loaded up in the trucks, and needless to say, I wasn't the first one on the scene because I lived so far out at the time. But it was pretty interesting.
Oh yeah, I remember the call, and I don't remember exactly how they said it, but I know they said there was fire showing, and pretty much everybody in the department knows that those old buildings downtown are, if we have a fire in them, it's going to be a while. And it was extremely cold, and I remember my wife saying something to me that you're not in much of a hurry, and I said I'm putting on some heavy socks because we're going to be here a while. And I guess that's maybe being the age that I am, that you learn that, yeah, you got to dress for this, because you're going to be there a while, and we were.
I lived at that time, I only lived about 3 blocks away from it. And when I got out of the house and started coming up, I was getting waved off by a patrolman, and he didn't know that I was a fireman at the time because I didn't have my lights on, and he was trying to get me to turn around. Well, then I turned my lights on, and he's, issuing me through the intersection. I looked back, and the whole front of the building was engulfed in flames already. So the first thing out of my mouth was, we're gonna be there for a while.
I remember getting the call, it was early in the morning, oh my gosh. And I remember putting all my stuff on. First, I had all my stuff laid out like I normally do, so it was pretty quick to get there. I went to the Andrews station. I remember hearing the chatter on our pagers, kind of what was going on. So we knew we had something. We knew we were gonna do something. So everybody assembled at the station. I was in the front of truck 104, which is basically our main truck. People were putting SCBAs on the back. I was in the front officer's chair running the radio and collecting accountability tags, which is we kind of keep track of who's on the scene that way. And I remember coming out of Andrew, we were maybe a mile outside of Andrew, and we looked out over, it was a clear night, and we looked out over towards Maquoketa, and you could see the normal glow of Maquoketa, right? So we crested the hill, and they're like, well, I can see the lights of Maquoketa. I don't see anything, but if you looked a little closer, the lights were the fireball from the fire itself. It's like, that is the fire. We couldn't believe how big it was. So everybody in the truck got very, very quiet. So at that point, then your training kind of kicks in. You start thinking about what we're going to do. So when we got here, we pulled into the main street, right across from where the dental place is now, parked 104. When we got out, I don't remember who from Maquoketa was in command, but they were telling assignments where they wanted all of us to go. I stayed by one of the other senior firefighters on Andrew collecting accountability tags until that was complete. Then I passed off that board to another officer, and then they put me on a 2.5-inch line in the middle of Main Street underneath the aerial. Maquoketa had their aerial up, and they were spraying water from the top, and I was sitting on the street, and you coil the 2.5-inch up and you sit on top of it, and it was so cold. I had a strap around me that was holding onto the nozzle because there's a lot of water pressure coming out of them. And I sat there for probably a good 2 hours on that hose. And because it was so cold, the mist coming off the aerial had froze me to the pavement. I was literally covered in over a 1/2 inch of ice. I couldn't actually get up off the hose when it was time to switch out.
Oh, as soon as you got wet, you instantly froze. It was like how do you want to put it, like armor? It had to be at least 25, 30 below at least, and that was with the wind chill. It was cold. It was very cold that morning, and it just progressed and got worse.
Most of my time probably was spent unfreezing trucks. I do most of the training for pump operators, and so our aerial ladder went down on us about 35 minutes, I think, into the program, and that was a big hit for us. And of course we had to get heaters on it just to get it folded up because everything was froze up on it.
I really thought we could save it at first. I really thought we were going to be able to get this under control. It'd probably be well into the morning by the time we were able to get out of there, and it got, it just took off. And when it took off, it took off. I was pretty certain that it was going to just be contained to the building it was in, and we weren't going to lose the whole block. But once it broke through the roof, then I knew we were going to be there a long time.
There's defensive and there's offensive strategies, and we were actually having to back out and go into defensive strategies on some of the buildings that we couldn't save. And yet we were trying to do offensive strategies at the same time on other buildings and trying to find out where we're going to be able to stop this event, kind of like a wildland firefighter. You have to start fires to be able to stop it. And that's how the strategies change. And so with us, this was such a new opponent for us because it was moving fast, and there was so much fuel in some of these buildings downtown. It was just incredible to try to catch up to it. That fire started in an apartment above a flooring and laminates store. So when the fire absorbed all the room and contents, it had dropped down into the flooring and laminates. And then with flooring, you have adhesives, you have all kinds of hardwood, you have a lot of fuel there. And then once it absorbed that, it went through the wall, through all the pipe chases and the different holes at maintenance and modifications.
Mm-hmm.
It went into a furniture store, and then that furniture store had mezzanines of furniture. So basically, from ground floor through the roof was just mezzanines of furniture, which is large open space. It's a lot of fuel, and once all that fuel became involved, it went out the roof. Now you got all the rubber roofing. You've got all of those things that are starting to spread it in both directions. So we had really fought it as an offensive measure, but on the backside, with the extreme cold that night, we had a very bad, real bad start at it, because we couldn't even get in the back door because the fuels were so thick, the smoke was so dense. It was very carbon-based, which is the smoke becomes a fuel itself. And that carbon-based fuel, as the smoke starts to churn, the heat, it's actually kind of considered a black fire itself, because it's a fuel and it is ready to ignite at any time.
So I'll give credit to our assistant chief, who came up with the idea that we supplement that with water from the river, and we fought it somewhat like a rural fire call, where you have to take your water to the fire. And that's when we had all the over 20 towns, and if I tried to name them, I'd leave somebody out, but I know it was well over 20 towns that brought tanker trucks and filled from the Maquoketa River and brought back up here and fought that downtown fire somewhat like we would a rural fire. And we even had cement trucks hauling water. Unheard of in some areas, some parts of the country. They'd never heard of using a cement truck to haul water. They can haul a lot of water. So we set up our tanks on Main Street, and there's pictures in the archives somewhere of a line of tanker trucks just waiting to dump their load of water into that tank. So that was somewhat unprecedented, and as I said, I gotta give my assistant chief credit for coming up with that, because we were going to have to throttle back our water application had we not picked up the slack in another way.
I spent probably the first 8 to 10 hours on the front side, working with the on truck 4, fetching parts, knowing the other towns. I knew a lot of the members, so as the mutual aid arrived, we connected. I became kind of a staging officer to some extent for a few hours. You go here, you go here. This guy needs help over there. Do you have this apparatus, whatever? Help set up the folding tanks for a massive water movement. Up to the point where we had guys on the roof and the wall fell. And then they wanted lines and equipment and ladders moved. And by the time we tried to move ladders, the ladders were froze. We didn't have any ladders left on the truck. Ladders were froze to the building. You couldn't extend them. You couldn't hardly move them. And we had guys on the roof that we had to get down. That was a little scary at that point.
Crews out of Quad Cities, they all come down to help, and news was here, and I mean, it was hours and hours to get them out. But we got here, obviously you knew it was something because the smoke was incredible already. And we left the station here, obviously seconds, we were on scene, just 2 blocks over. But we rolled up on Main Street, which was right in front of the structure that got called in as being on fire. Myself and 2 other guys, off the truck, right to the front door. There was obviously smoke rolling out the windows. Checked everything, up the stairs, knocked it down, and we thought we were done.
So you went in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. 3 of us made initial entry into that, and we literally, within seconds, thought, yeah, we're done. This was good, cleaned up. We'll be able to go home. And turned around, came back down the stairs after we knocked it down, made sure it was clear. And you could tell by the look on Chief's face that it wasn't good what he was hearing from the backside.
It was horrible. You just felt like an icicle all day long. We had various rotations. They started the first rotation out for anybody that was there on the initial call. They had started setting up a warming shelter up at the old community center, and nobody wanted to leave, and they forced us, you have to go up, you have to get warmed up. You know, we were bussed up there. But once we warmed up and we got right back down and went back at it again, then they opened up right across the street. I think it was Mayberry's opened up the one store for us to warm up and stuff in there, and then Mega had closed Main Street in and had us food in there for us and everything, and let us warm up in there.
Wives came down and brought stuff, you know, just everybody. There was more food in there than you could ever possibly eat. You know, I mean, we were well fed.
Yes.
You know, it was pretty amazing to see all the people that brought stuff for us. You know, because there was a lot of firemen here.
Yeah.
But I do remember coming back and looking down, I want to say it was Main Street, and just the row of trucks bringing water in. I mean, as far as you could see, that's all you could see was trucks bringing water in. And traffic was stopped every way you could think of, and I didn't see him probably until, well, it would have been a Saturday night, and then I didn't see him until Monday morning.
Yeah. It was almost 2 days before I saw really any of my family.
I was there 27 hours before I went home and took, I think I was home for 4 or 5 hours for a nap quick, and then I come back. So like me and Officer Burns were there for 27 hours before we went home.
It was, what, Sunday? Like Sunday morning?
Saturday
morning.
morning. Yep.
And Mom just is like, we gotta go help, and we were all just in it, you know, whether they needed food or they needed water or a hug or, you know, just a reprieve of silliness too. You just jumped in and helped.
It was so cold. Oh my God, it was cold.
It was cold. I was supposed to work that day out of Gassers, and I was supposed to have class and then go to work, and it didn't even dawn on me until like the middle of the day that I had places to be, and I'm like, oh, well, I'm already in the middle of this, let's go. And we started out going down. I was in my car, my gas tank was on E with the light on when the day started, and by the grace of God, I never ran out of gas that day, running constantly around. And now he says to me, well, why didn't you jump in one of the fire trucks that was available, the units out back? Yeah, I'm not gonna think about that. But anyway, and it was just constant, you know, we need this, can you go get this? We made several trips to Walmart, several trips to Gassers and Tyson's for hand warmers. Walmart was socks and food. And then the biggest thing was, I think I ran around for, I don't even know how many hours. And then finally I was like, okay, you know what, I'm gonna find my dad. And so I started asking around on Main Street side, you know, have you seen my dad? Have you seen my dad? And they're like, yeah, he's in one of the restaurants. And somebody finally said, yeah, I just saw him go into Main Street Cafe. And so I went in and I'm looking at all the firefighters covered in ice, trying to figure out which one is him, and can't find him anywhere. So I started panicking, and I turned around and was headed out, and then he walked in as I was heading out and jumped in his arms, bawling. He's like, okay, you're fine. Like, and that was, even though you knew that there was nobody in the fire, there was still the conditions that they were so horrendous that you just didn't know what was going on with people.
We were well over 40 hours on that call with very, very little sleep, and several of the other men too. And I can't think of who all it might have been, but I know the two of us that were kind of the incident commanders of the scene. put in a lot of hours, and there was a lot of cleanup when we got done. Once the fire was out, we had trucks to thaw out. They were icicles. The pictures that people have taken will reflect that if you get a chance to see any of those. So we had a lot of equipment to clean up. We had equipment from other departments that wasn't ours that showed up here. We had to sort out and try and figure out whose equipment it was. And so the next few days were kind of chaos in hoping that we didn't have anything major to respond to again. On top of that, during that fire, we were in the process, as I mentioned earlier, I wanted to see this fire station rebuilt. Well, we were right in the process of that rebuilding of this fire station when that fire call came in. So our space was very limited out in the truck room at that time, and it was very, I didn't have this office at that time. I was at a card table out in the truck bay in the corner and trying to do reports and the paperwork involved with this and answer the phone from news organizations and from insurance companies and so on and so forth. It was a little bit discombobulated, I guess I'll say. But we got through it, and as I said before, not one of our proudest moments, but we carry on.
Crazy at that time. Is like, never thought I'd ever see something like that. What's going to happen next, you know? I guess it was kind of devastating seeing businesses go down and people's careers or jobs being taken away. So that was at that point, though. I think it was just a lot of shock early on until later on and several months down the line.
The size, the magnitude, how quickly it spread, just the weather, everything was. This one was just different. It was a major blow. It changed the face of Maquoketa forever. There's no doubt about that. So, driving past that site for 2 years and still seeing the rubble was, it created a black eye for Maquoketa. And once it was finally able to be cleaned up and such, I think that created a momentum. The pendulum swung at that point once it started getting cleaned up, and so hopefully things keep progressing for the city.
In your career, you have to figure out how to unown it or disown it. It's not my fire, it wasn't my wreck, and I'm just here because it's part of my job. Takes a little while to understand that and learn how to do that. To unwind, one of my instructors once says there's an awful lot of really raunchy stories that get told in the back of a truck on the way back from an ugly scene, because the guys are de-stressing to some extent. Those stories cannot be told anywhere else because nobody else was in the mess that you were. So you lean heavily on the crew that you're with, the guys that you're with. That's where the emotional part comes in, and the more time you spend with the guys, the more camaraderie you have with the fellas, the easier it is to judge them and to see how they're doing, to know what his breaking point is, or if he's close, for them to know what mine is, and say, you look pretty pooped, you should come back here and sit for a while, go run the truck for a minute. There's things like that there's ways to alleviate that emotional stress that comes with it, but I do, and I think other guys do, you disown the situation.
It's not, I can't say it never happens, because you start dealing with kids and losing kids in this situation, and it hits you hard. We talk amongst each other a lot, especially if there's a life loss, and it doesn't have to be somebody it's just the whole idea of it. If you lose somebody and it's your fire, it sets in pretty hard. But we talk a lot, and we'll put on some, post-fire stuff here at the station if we lose somebody or if something bad happens. Because you don't know how some guys are gonna deal with it or take it. You know, it might seem like being on 17 years, there's some stuff that, you know, might not affect me, but if we get a guy that's only on 1 or 2 years, it could be bothering him a whole lot.
You see a lot. It's hard. It's, you think you can, at the time you can take it. It all just builds up. Like I said, you got to have the, not mentality, it's heart, soul. It's something you want to do. I don't know if you get forced into it, I don't think you can do it. You know, if someone says, hey, why don't you try being a fireman? You know, come on, try it out. It's something you gotta want to do, I think.
You could say I love it. But yeah, it's, I don't know. I wouldn't say it was my calling back then, but it is now, that's for sure.
It's, I mean, I've seen a lot of people come in with good intentions to want to be firefighters. I guess being a firefighter, to me, you know, it's about serving your community. I mean, you have to have a mindset that it's more than just you, and it's more than just going to be the glory, because there really is very little glory in this. And I've seen people come in with the wrong mindset and the wrong idea of what it is. And you know, they get burned out and wash out pretty quick. But if you're here for any length of time, you're here because, you know, you want to, and you have a sense of duty. I mean, you want to serve your community, you want to give back, and everybody here wants to do that too, and wants to, you know, wants to do the right thing.
It's so important. I mean, granted, we have Uncle Craig, who is on the fire department.
Yeah.
Woo! But every one of these 28, 30 some odd firemen, our family too, if we ever needed anything, we could call and they would be right there.
It seems like every time when you volunteer to be a fireman, you start to gather a lot of hats. And the community looks at you on most of these instances that how can we, you know, be able to educate ourselves to move forward. And after that deal uptown, that was our big event that the city really got a good understanding of who we are and what we are capable of. So it did, it brought a community together. It took that to bring a community together for us. So they've always been very supportive of us. Our facility here had upgraded previous to that, so it was interesting.
I can't thank the public, not just for the support in 2008, but the public in general supports our fire department in ways that you cannot imagine. If we've ever got a fundraiser going, the public is always there to donate, to help out. Our annual pancake breakfast that we have is one of the best attended in the area. The public is just super, and my gratitude goes out to every member of the community that helps us out in any way that they can, and I would just say keep it coming, folks, because a volunteer department thrives on that kind of support. The city funds us, and they do a nice job of funding us, but they can't always fund every expense that a volunteer fire department incurs.
Yeah, so there was some struggle to get that site cleaned up, and then when we were able to get it cleaned up, and I say we, I mean we as in Maquoketa as the city, and it became a green space, and it's just kind of evolved into an event space for a lot of different organizations. I think is a great thing. I mean, I would love to see businesses go back downtown, and to see downtown kind of get a new shot of life, but maybe the green space as an event area is that shot of life that downtown needs. So there could be some positives that come out of it from that aspect. And then like you said, we 2 years ago, myself and some other members of the fire department here were kicking around ideas of fundraisers and fun events that we see other departments do, and things that we'd like to try. And so that's where we came up with Fireball, and then so we'll be going into our third year here in 2017.
So Fireball is just kind of created we wanted to do something fun for the community, and so that's what we've kind of evolved that into somewhat of a fundraiser, but more to have fun, bring some events downtown, have some bands come in. So yeah.
Out of the ruins of rubble, out of smoke.
Out of our night of struggle, we see a ray of hope.
One pale, thin ray reaching for the day.
We can build a beautiful city. Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
We can build a beautiful city.
Not a city of angels.
But we can build a city of man.
We may not reach the ending, but we can start.
Slowly but truly mending.
Now, maybe now,
We can build a
start
beautiful
learning
city.
how.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
When your trust is all but shattered.
When your faith is all but killed.
You can give up, bitter and battered.
Or you can slowly start to build
A beautiful city.